Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name is Dr. Mark, board certified in anatomic and forensic pathology, staff pathologist for St. Gertrude University Medical Center. Our hospital sits 3 metro stops east of the city center, an L-shaped complex of brick and glass that keeps sleepless company with the ambulance bay, the power plant, and the medical school. On paper, my shift runs 18 o'clock to 6 o'clock. On paper, we staff 2 overnight. Tonight, I'm covering a double. The other pathologist called out to triage in the ED when the city started to light up with the same word on different radios. Incident. The day crew signed out fast. Unknown febrile syndrome, someone said as they pulled on jackets. Lots of agitation, then sudden collapse. EMS says traffic lights are out north of the river. I said I'd take the night, which is where I live anyway. Under the fluorescent hush, with the stainless steel sinks and the hum of refrigeration, with the wide-tired gurneys lined in a queue like train cars waiting for a track to clear. By 1830, the elevator started dinging like a metronome. A clinical transporter wheeled in the first, an ED death. Adult male, early 40s, no ID, brought from a street corner near the tram stop. The triage notes came with handwriting a nurse must have scrawled while bracing a shoulder phone. Fever, seizure-like activity, unresponsive. The second arrived at 1848. The third, fourth, and fifth followed with uneven spacing, each with a different story, none of them complete. One slipped on stairs. One fell during confusion. One stopped breathing while restrained for safety. The paperwork's language bent itself into careful shapes to avoid conclusions. I checked temperatures with the IR thermometer out of habit. Normal post-mortem drift to ambient happens at roughly 1 degree per hour, slower in larger bodies, faster in thin. The dead don't hold heat. But the first was 34 degrees Celsius at hand skin, which is high if you'd been gone long. The second was 37.2. The third read 35. The fourth, 36.8. The fifth, 34.9. I frowned, wrote the numbers, felt the prick of worry you get when pattern and expectation refuse to shake hands. We bag and tag with a chain of custody sticker, record the personal effects, log a time. I slid each into a stainless drawer, a rectangle barely wider than a shoulder span. The cold room, really a walk-in refrigerator, was steady at 4 degrees. The compressor motor thrummed and clicked off, the rhythm of any night here, noisy enough that when you go upstairs you think the world has muted itself. At 19:15, security called down. Dr. Vasilenko, this is hall control. We're directing all visitors to exit. Elevator access restricted to staff. We're going to badging only after 20 o'clock. Understood, I said. We'll keep the basement corridor doors locked. Copy, said the voice. And Doc, if you get anything unusual, ring us. We've had reports of disruptive behavior in the lobby. Unusual is relative in a hospital, but tonight I wrote a note to myself. Unusual seems to be trending. By 2040 we had 9. The ED was holding more. One arrived from an assisted living facility with a note that said, possible neurodegenerative baseline. Another arrived from an apartment with a neighbor's name and a request to find a family member. A third had a wristband from our own ICU with a time of death that didn't match the last nurse's note, as if the team had been too busy to stop and write when the line flattened. I spoke briefly with Olivia from the ED, her face pale in the camera above the basement badge reader. People keep standing up after we pronounce, she said. Not many, a handful. It's like a surge, then they're out, then they're... She searched for a word she trusted. Moving. Agonal movements? I asked. Spinal reflexes? No, Olivia said softly. Not that, Doc. It's something else. We went quiet together. She glanced over her shoulder and signed off with a quick wave. Behind her, a patient transport tech pushed a gurney at a trot. I thought about a dozen explanations, most of them wrong, but false comfort is still comfort. Hypoxia can make strange dances out of the last electrical storms in the nervous system. But standing up is not a reflex. Standing up is intention. The language of clinical notes is built to avoid that word. The language in my head didn't avoid anything. At 21:12, the 10th arrived. The bag was zipped up but warm against my wrist when I took the handles. I checked the zipper and tag, unzipped a quarter, verified identity. Adult female, mid-30s. No obvious trauma beyond abrasions. Pupils fixed and dilated. No corneal reflex, no breath sounds. If there was a pulse, it was hiding. I zipped again. The From ED note said, riot near Central Market, fever, confusion, collapse, short downtime. Intubation attempt aborted due to agitation. The word riot had 3 circles around it like a constellation. She was warm. Body temperature takes time to fall. Warm is not unusual at 21:12 when a collapse happened at 20:05. But I rubbed my hand along the outside of the bag and felt what I told myself was residual heat. Then I placed a gloved finger under the zipper flap and felt a movement under that. Not a breath. A subtle, regular expansion, not in the chest, but in the upper abdomen, as if something were trying to find the pattern. I stopped. The walk-in's compressor clicked and the hum faded, then started again. I placed her in drawer C3, slid the stainless plate forward. The latch made a promise to me with its metal mouth. I started my voice logs. I use them when the night stretches thin and the paperwork starts to talk back. I keep a simple protocol. Patient number, time, any notes for the morning crew or the medical examiner. Case 10, I said into my phone, female, approximately 35, unknown identity, from ED with febrile syndrome, pronounced at 1951. I double-checked the tag. Correction, 1954. Tagged and stored C3. Note, remains unusually warm compared to others with similar downtime. Logger for priority review in the morning. Also, note compressor cycling normal. The overhead lights flickered once, as if the building had blinked. The refrigerator hummed and then cut. The digital panel over the door flashed E13, then went dark. The room remembered it was a box in a bigger system. The bigger system laughed softly and said not tonight. I set my phone down and went to the electrical closet. The breakers for the cold room sit in a gray panel behind an OSHA sticker that insists on a lockout tagout I can never find. All of them were up. I listened for the heartbeat of the compressor and heard silence. The morgue is 2 rooms and a hall. Reception, autopsy suite and a corridor with wall cabinets, a mop sink, and a heavy door to the cold room. Past the autopsy suite is a staff exit that opens to the external stairwell. 1 flight to a loading area, 2 and 3 to the back of the pathology wing. You need a badge to go up. Fire code means it pops open from inside if you push the crash bar. Between here and there are 2 gurneys, 1 mobile X-ray, and a cart with instruments I should put away more often. Somewhere upstairs, a metal object fell on tile and sounded like a chime. I tried the panel again, then got on the phone. Facilities didn't pick up. Security did. Basement pathology, I said. Cold rooms lost power. Copy, came the voice I recognized. Bartek on night dispatch. We've got a rolling brownout across the wing. Backup gen is up for life safety loads. Non-critical may drop in cycles until we balance. Do you need a portable? Prefer not, I said. But if we can't get the compressor back, we'll have to move. Understood. We have staff redeployed. Keep the corridor doors secure. Call if you need escort. The corridor doors, one from the service hall, one from the autopsy side, have push bars and closers calibrated by someone who loves compliance more than convenience. I checked the sight glass and saw the service hall empty, the yellowish light looking tired. I slid the manual bolt on our side for good measure. When I came back, the cold room's temperature display was dark. Without the compressor, the room would drift up toward ambient. We don't have long in a heat wave, we have longer in a basement at night. Tonight was neither heat wave nor winter. I had hours, not days. I told myself to breathe like I teach our residents on their first night. Slow and square. In through the nose, out through the mouth, as if breath controlled reality. At 21:38, I heard a sound like a slow-drawer kiss. I turned. The stainless door at C3 was out a finger's width, latch still down, as if someone on the other side had pressed gently and the steel had flexed and forgotten to return to its exact home. Cold air was a memory against my ankles. I walked toward it, each footstep crisp on the epoxy floor. I told myself it had been improperly seated, that I'd been too quick. I touched the handle. "I'm here," I said aloud for no one, the way you might speak to a room that has grown crowded with your thoughts. Another sound, soft as someone testing a belt. The smallest movement of plastic within plastic, a breath inside a bag sounds like a question. I felt the hairs along my forearms push against the sleeves of my gown. "Case 10, I said to the recorder without looking away from the drawer. Drawer appears ajar by approximately 1 centimeter. Possible pressure equalization from compressor off-cycle. Preparing to reseat. I pressed the face with both hands and it slid true, steel against steel, latch clicking politely. I waited. The room breathed the way the building did. Somewhere, air handlers running like the ocean in a seashell. I listened for anything out of place and heard my own pulse. I held a minute and then returned to the autopsy suite to collect what I knew I'd want if things went sideways. The bone saw we use for calvarial cuts, an oscillating, guarded blade tool that cuts bone but not skin. It's not a cutter you bring to a conversation. It's a last resort. On the way, I grabbed the ABC powder fire extinguisher from its bracket near the mop sink. People think of extinguishers as for flames only. I've been here long enough to respect them as physics. CO2, powder, pressure, visibility reducer, noisemaker, distance creator. Above the autopsy table, the security camera's red indicator glowed. Somewhere, someone might still be watching. I slid the bone saw's power cord across the floor to the suite's GFCI outlet, tested a quick trigger pull to ensure the head oscillated. The sound is a thin, bright hum, a precise window into metal discipline that has comforted generations of pathologists who learn to separate the calm of tools from the storms of their thoughts. I placed the saw near the door, extinguisher beside it, and stacked 2 transport gurneys as a makeshift barricade outside the cold room. Wheels locked, side rails up, brakes engaged. The autopsy suite door is solid core on safety hinges. If I had to hold, I could hold. I called security again. Hall control. "Bartek," I said. "I need a basement lockdown. Restrict traffic from service corridor into pathology. If anyone needs entry for any reason, you call me first." "Already set," he said, voice dropping as if the walls had moved closer. "We've got disturbances on 2 floors. ED is on controlled access. There's chatter from the ICU about unusual activity in post-care. I'm sending you a portable radio. It'll be in the dumbwaiter in 2 minutes." "We never use the dumbwaiter," I said. "We do tonight," he said, and the line snapped to quiet. I cut through the reception area to the old linen dumbwaiter we keep for nostalgia and rare supply runs. The metal door slid up with some persuasion, and inside, true to his word, was a handheld radio wrapped in a clean exam glove. I set the channel to Security 1 and clipped it to my gown at the chest. "Pathology has the radio," I said. "Copy?" "Copy," crackled Bartek. "We'll check on your power. You're on our list after the PACU loop." I looked around the reception area, the roll of white body bags on the bottom shelf, the shelf above with toe tags and pens, the steel table that serves as a quiet desk where I've written 10,000 notes. There's a coffee maker here that my predecessor insisted on keeping, though nobody drinks at night because caffeine makes the hours long behave like longer ones. Tonight, I entertained it for the company. The brew light came on. The power wasn't completely lost. On the way back, the radio hissed. Another voice, Olivia from the ED, cut through. "Security, this is ED charge. We've moved criticals to the observation ward. Some patients are attempting to ambulate without assistance after being pronounced. We are holding them. Would appreciate a posture from HISS. HICS is the Hospital Incident Command System, the official phrase for when someone with a vest and a clipboard turns the chaos into a plan. "Copy ED," said Bartek. "Hicks is in the admin conference room. Lockdown cascade is in effect for non-essential floors." The calm words did not fit the edges of the sounds I could hear under them. Raised voices, the rhythmic squeal of a gurney wheel that needed grease, a distant alarm that meant an infusion pump wanted attention. Back in the cold room corridor, I stood and listened again. Nothing, just nothing, the kind of nothing that makes you find shapes in it. I held my palm an inch from the cold room door. The steel was cool, but not cold. I opened the door and stepped into the square. The scent of the chilled air, usually like a mountain stream translated to stainless steel, had dulled. The overhead bulbs batted their fluorescence into corners. All the drawers were flush. Then I saw the second discrepancy, like a misplaced book on a shelf you own. C2 had a misaligned toe tag visible in the gap between frame and drawer face, as if the tag had slipped when the drawer had been nudged from inside. I closed my eyes for a count of 3 I didn't feel in my lungs. I walked to C2 and pressed both hands flat over the steel. The metal gave a 1/4 of a millimeter and came back. That's normal. Stainless is elastic in thin sections. I took my stethoscope, silly for a body drawer maybe, and put the diaphragm on the face. What I heard was the building more than anything. The low dolly of the ventilation system, a plumbing line murmuring to itself. Then I heard a second sound. The muffled, regular rub of plastic on plastic, a rhythm so slow that if it were a living person I'd call it bradypnea. You don't get breath sounds through a hard surface, you get vibrations, movement. A bag that might be breathing will whisper to a drawer. I stepped back, shut the cold room door, and slid the bolt from our side. 2 barriers are a conversation I prefer to a single one. I stood a long moment with my gloved hands on the bolt, the nitrile creaking. The radio crackled again. "Security to all units. Report of individuals on level 2 service stairwell moving against flow. If you're near a secure door, do not open without ID confirmation." I opened the autopsy suite cabinet and took out the door wedges we use when we're moving equipment. The wedges are rubber triangles that turn any door into a suggestion. I set one by the inside of the autopsy suite door, one by reception, one near the staff exit. If I had to pivot, I'd want the option to hold a door open or keep one firmly closed against rebound. My phone buzzed with a message from our chief resident, Max. "You okay down there?" "Fine," I typed. "Just quiet. Power blip, you?" "ICU is reporting weird stuff," he wrote. "Don't open doors if you don't have to." "Thanks, Max," I replied. "Will do." At 22:03, the cold room compressor tried to come back. I heard the click of a relay, the short attempt of a motor that had been asked to push a hill made higher by heat. It coughed, thought better, and went silent. The temperature display flickered and showed 7 degrees, then darkened. 7 means we were drifting up. Not catastrophic yet, but we had bodies that needed the cold, and I had a warm anomaly I'd put into a drawer and told myself I'd think about in the morning. It was not morning. I went back into the cold room. The lined faces of the drawers looked like apartment windows in a building after curfew. I put a hand on C3's handle and left it there like a handshake with a closed door. A soft thunk drew my attention left. D row, top. Drawer D1, empty until an hour ago. The latch vibrated and settled. Not all sounds are messages. Some are pipes. Some are the ghosts of compressors. But Pattern is a professor, and everything tonight felt like an exam. Security 1, this is pathology, I said into the radio. Please advise if any motion sensors or badge attempts flagged near our external stairwell. Bartek obliged me with his best imitation of calm. No badge reads at your stairwell door since 1836. 2 badge reads at the service corridor, both yours. External camera shows no movement. We're seeing motion on level 1 north corridor. ED requests support. Copy, I said. We're holding. I had a decision to make, the kind that doesn't advertise itself as one until later. I could hold in the cold room corridor and trust that the compressor would return and that whatever was happening elsewhere would resolve with daylight and administration and coffee. Or I could open the staff exit and move up the external stairwell toward the pathology wing, where there were more people and locked doors and the shelter of colleagues. The stairwell door would open with a push. It would also open to anything pushing from the other side. I arranged the 2 gurneys differently, crossing their frames to make a wedge with the heavier one nearest the cold room door. I dragged the rolling mobile fridge, a stainless roll-in unit we use temporarily when we prep overflow cases, toward the corridor door so that if I needed to jam something against the push bar, I'd have weight ready. Metal makes friends with metal if you ask it to. The radio flared with a half-heard phrase, "They're up again," then flattened to static. I called out, "Repeat last." Silence. I tested the bone saw again. A quick chirp to prove it lived. I put the extinguisher's pin on a lanyard around my wrist, not because I wanted a bracelet, but because adrenaline erases more than fear. It erases small items you wish you'd kept. At 22:17, the call button in the autopsy suite dinged. We don't get calls. The button is a hospital standard. Press to summon help, press to ask for supplies. But nobody uses it here because we always fetch our own. It dinged once, innocently, like an elevator arriving. Then it dinged again. Then it held. I stepped into the suite. The light over the call panel, a green jewel, pulsed. I pressed the intercom. "Pathology," I said. "Who's calling?" Nothing. I pressed again, leaned in. "This is pathology. If you need help, speak." "Doc?" The voice was muffled, genderless through static. "Doc, you down there?" "Identify," I said, the hospital's habit slipping into my voice. "Name and location." The intercom sputtered. "It's Pete, EVS. I'm on service stairwell 2. Something's on the other side of the door near you. Don't open. It's..." The intercom squealed and died, the kind of feedback that means the building is rearranging its electrons. "Pete," I said, "do not attempt to enter. Evacuate to level 1 and call security." No response. I didn't like the way my own words sounded. I called Bartek. EVS called me from service stairwell 2. He says there's something pressing the door near pathology. Please confirm his location. Please confirm the stairwell is clear. "Copy," said Bartek. "We'll try to ping his badge." I stood still in the autopsy suite, the hinges of every door now a little more eloquent than I wanted them to be. I returned to the cold room corridor and listened again. The movement inside the drawers, if that was what it was, had become a choir of very modest noises. The whisper of bag plastic, the elastic snick of a zipper tab nudged from inside, the softest thump of a knee or a shoulder testing a boundary. We care for the deceased like we care for the living. That is the ethos. We make space for dignity, even in the company of horror. Tonight, I confronted an inversion. The dignified space was becoming animated, and the living, me, was the one holding still. My training dumped practical checklists into my mind as a refuge. If this is a pathogen, oxygenating and then collapsing patients, consider airborne and droplet precautions. Upgrade my N95 to a PPR. We keep one in the cabinet for bone dust. I dug it out, the powered air purifying respirator. Fumbled the belt and the hood with the muscle memory of drills, toggled the blower. The fan's purr stitched a thin veil between my ears and the world. The radio hissed with Bartek again. "Doc, we got Pete on level 1. He's okay. He's heading to the loading dock. Do not open any service doors." "Understood," I said. I stood with the respirator's clear hood fogging slightly around my cheeks, watching the doors and waiting for the building to tell me what it wanted. At 22:29, the elevator chimed upstairs, traveled, chimed again, then stopped. Elevators are storytellers. You learn their languages. This one said someone had called it, then someone else had stopped it between floors. I imagined security keying it down and then thought of the ED need and someone overriding that. Somewhere a family member was pressing a button in a lobby and hoping. Somewhere a nurse was pressing a different one and praying to the god of light switches. The cold room door handle twitched once. Not a movement of metal fatigue. A tested push, then another. Then stillness. I put my palm flat against the door. I could feel the faintest tremor, not from my hand but through the steel. Something inside had shifted weight. Bodies are heavy. The shift of one inside a drawer transmits differently than the shift of a dozen. Tonight, I heard multiple points of pressure at once, like rain finding its rhythm on a roof. "Security 1, I said into the radio. "Pathology requesting immediate basement corridor lockdown and stairwell barricade. We have potential movement inside the cold room drawers. Advise on procedure." Bartek didn't pause, which I loved him for. "Lockdown is active, stairwell secured. Procedure is shelter in place. Do not open cold room. If the door is compromised, fall back to autopsy suite and hold. We're sending 2 officers to your corridor door. They will not enter without your confirmation." "Copy," I said. "I'm staging a barrier." I dragged the roll-in fridge to the corridor door and tipped it gently against the push bar, calculating the angle so that if pressed from the other side it would dig into the floor instead of skating forward. The weight made a respectable doorstop. I took the 2 gurneys and reversed one, jamming its foot end against the fridge and its head under the autopsy suite's crash bar to create a forked brace. It wasn't pretty. It was physics. I was in mid-engineering when the call button dinged again, now not friendly at all. The intercom light fuzzed like a glow stick past its prime. "Doc!" Olivia's voice came through, thin and high. "We're going to lock down level 1. Please do not come up, please." "Understood," I said. She started to say something else, then cut off. A different voice took over. A male voice I didn't know, cool but urgent. "All clinical units, this is His SS. We have observed unexpected motor activity in certain deceased patients. Restrict movement of remains. Do not transport to basement unless escorted. Repeat, do not." I stood still with the radio pressed near my chest, the PAPR whispering my borrowed breaths back to me. We don't talk in absolutes in medicine. We say likely, consistent with, probable. Unexpected motor activity in certain deceased patients was the most administrative way to describe a thing that didn't belong to any shelf in any cabinet I'd ever opened. I appreciated the effort. I also understood the message under the message: reality has shifted. Behave as if it has, and we will catch up. I returned to the cold room door and listened. The interior sounds had become exploratory rather than frantic. No banging, no urgent thrashing, just the steady audition of boundaries. The handles on the drawers are solid, the latches were down. The metal frame is bolted into masonry. Under normal circumstances, no one inside can move anything. Under abnormal ones, physics still holds, just grumpier. I spoke into my voice log again because order is a candle. Night Pathologist log, 2238. Observed intermittent motion in storage drawers. C2, C3, D1. Sounds consistent with slow changes in position. Refrigeration unit offline due to breaker fault. Compressor attempted restart at 2203, failed. Current temperature likely 7 to 8 degrees Celsius. Staged physical barriers at corridor door and autopsy suite. Radio contact with security and ED, advising myself to hydrate. I took a sip from the bottle I keep under the autopsy sink. The water tasted like pipes and summer air you've kept inside. When you remove fear's volume knob, what remains is practice. I went back through the suite methodically. Bone saw cord untangled and route taped down to avoid a trip. Extinguisher on the left for a right-hand draw. Scalpels closed. Needles capped. Sharps container latched. Waste bins empty enough. I put on a second pair of gloves. I taped the wrists. I worked, not because I needed to, but because doing so drew a circle around my brain and wrote in the center, "You are not a passenger." The footsteps above returned, closer now, heavy with equipment. I could tell by the way they paused outside the service elevator, the rhythm of someone with radios and vests making decisions. "Security approaching pathology," said the radio. "Doc, we're at your corridor door." "Do not open," I said. "Confirm the outer corridor is clear." "It's clear," came a woman's voice I recognized as Officer Daria. "We're holding outside." "Thank you," I said. "Stay put." There is a version of this night where I open the cold room door to prove something to myself, and in doing so become a footnote in someone else's log. There is another version where I run up the stairwell and trade one unknown for a busier one. I did neither. I sat on the stool in the autopsy suite. I closed my eyes. I listened. When I opened them again, the clock said 23:04. The compressor tried again. Click, whir, die. The building made a decision somewhere that starred me in its consequences. The call button dinged another time and then a final long note as if someone had held it down in farewell. The PAPR hummed. My thoughts arranged themselves like instruments tuning to the same key. I stood, went to the cold room door and placed my hand once more on the steel. "Case 10, I said softly, because calling her by number was the only respectful option left. "I know you're in there. I know there's movement. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't talk to the dead. It's not part of the job. Tonight, the boundary between part of the job and what keeps a human had thinned." The drawer at C3 answered with the faintest, steady pressure from inside against out, polite, insistent. Then another drawer joined, C, 2, and another, D, 1. Until the cold room door itself felt like a drumhead being tested by small, patient fingers. I went back to the autopsy suite and set the extinguisher in my lap. I dialed Bartek. "Security 1. "Bartek," I said. "I'm going to need a lockdown announcement over the hospital PA that includes the basement. Tell facilities to prioritize a restart of the cold room compressor. If we can get the temperature down, maybe we can slow..." I searched for a word and picked one that belonged to physiology, not myth. "Motion." "Copy," he said. PA is overwhelmed with announcements, but I'll thread you in. Facilities says 2 techs are on their way to your floor to check the panel. Advise them to knock, announce, and wait for my confirmation, I said. Already in the note, he said. Doc, keep your doors closed. Will do, I said. The building went on breathing. Somewhere distant, a generator coughed and steadied. The ED alarm repeated itself, then stilled. The heavy footsteps above me paced and paused. At 2331, the stairwell door behind the staff exit shook once. The crash bar resonated with the thud of a shoulder. I froze where I stood with the extinguisher trigger under my finger. The door shook again, then a third time. 3 is a number that in a hospital means protocol, not panic. It means a code knock. Identify, I called, name and purpose. Facilities, came a voice. Ramesh and Luca, here for your compressor. Show me your badges, I said, moving to the small wired glass window in the door. 2 faces peered through. 2 badges were held up. Ramesh I knew from 100 helpful rescues where a light was too dim or a drain ran slow. Luca was new. His eyes were too wide. Hold, I said. I'm going to clear the corridor. I looked at the cold room door. The handle had gone still again as if the room was saving its questions for later. I eased the gurney wedge back from the crash bar just enough to let the door open 2 inches. You will step inside and close the door behind you, I said to the glass. You will not, under any circumstances, open the cold room door. They nodded. I pulled the door, they slipped in. I closed it, and we stood in a triangle of tired people under bright lights. Ramesh held a tool bag that made comforting noises when it shifted. Panel in the closet, I said. We try to reset. No joy. Ramesh opened the panel. His fingers danced along the breakers with the affection of a pianist returning to a favorite. We lost a leg, he said after a moment, which meant one of the 3 phases in the feed had tripped. She'll kick and fail till we balance. We can jump her to a different leg for a while, but it'll pull from your other circuits. Do it, I said. We don't need lights as much as we need cold. He nodded, slipped on insulated gloves and went to work. Luca watched the cold room door the way a new sailor watches the ocean. I put a hand on his shoulder so he'd watch Ramesh instead. When Ramesh made the change, the building's heartbeat altered. The compressor clicked. It wheezed. It found its footing like a runner who had tripped and then remembered how legs work. The temperature display blinked to life. 7.4 degrees Celsius, then 7.3. The hum grew confident. Beautiful, I said, and meant it. Thank you. We'll leave it like this for a few hours, he said. Then we'll rebalance when the ED isn't pulling the whole world. I walked them to the staff exit. Take the external stairwell, I said. Do not open any other doors. If someone calls from the other side, verify on the radio. Ramesh nodded, set a gentle hand on Luca's elbow, and they disappeared into the stairwell with a whoomp of a door that had opinions. Back in the corridor, the cold room door felt cooler under my palm. The interior sound slowed in a way that could be wishful thinking but also could be physics. Muscle function dampened, enzymatic processes bored. I offered a silent thank you to whoever wrote refrigeration manuals. The radio popped with Daria's voice. Doc, we've got the corridor. 2 of us are here. You're good. Thank you, I said. Hold there. Midnight came. The night divided itself neatly at 0 o'clock, as if that mattered to anyone's heart. The hisses and wheezes in the background found a tempo that didn't set my teeth on edge. I thought I might eat something and discovered hunger had left the building with the day shift. I drank water again. I checked the saw. I sat and stood and sat. At 0:42, the cold room gave a different sound. An airy hiss from within, as if a bag's zipper had been slowly, carefully coaxed open a centimeter more than it had wanted. I checked C3's latch again. Still down. The sound didn't repeat. I considered opening to reseat a bag and discarded the thought as if it were radioactive. I am a scientist, not a ghost hunter. But I am also a person who knows when to respect a closed door. The intercom dinged with a new voice. "Max, my resident." "Mark, you still there?" "Still here," I said. "Admin wants counts," he said, his voice careful. "How many in your cold room?" "9, I said. "We were expecting more. I told ED to hold." "Good," he said. He paused. "We're learning. There are patterns. It's not everyone. Some keep going, some don't. Those who do, move. Slowly at first. Then they try to orient." "Orient," I repeated. "As in, toward sound," he said. "The doors are sturdy," I said, to him and to me. "We're cooling them. Cooling helps." "Everything helps," he said, which is a resident way of staying brave. "Drink water," I said, fatherly without meaning to. "You too," he said, echoing, and the line clicked away. I checked the clock, 1:10. The AC cycled, the building exhaled. Daria made a status check on the radio, then hummed a bar of a song into the mic without realizing it was hot. The hum made the air feel human again. At 1:43, something somewhere banged. A single heavy report like a cart pushed into a closed door at speed. Daria cursed softly and keyed her mic. "We're good," she said. "Someone ran at radiology and learned about physics." "Copy," Bartek replied. "Hold." The cold room held. At 2:07, the elevator above us ran a long trip, then another. The building was busy in a way that felt like activity with a goal rather than activity with panic. I imagined Hicks boards with columns and magnets and people with vests that said operations and logistics and planning, the tripod of order holding a tent over chaos. The temperature display read 6.2 degrees Celsius. The interior sounds had faded to the occasional shift. It felt like we had turned a corner, not to resolution, but to a relative. I allowed my muscles to stop clenching and then shook out my hands. I had the bone saw in reach, the extinguisher on my left, the radio on my chest, the PAPR whispering its reassurance in my ears. I breathed and let the night continue to be itself. At 2:49, my phone buzzed with a push alert. City emergency services messaging had gone public. Shelter in place, avoid travel, medical facilities on controlled access. It included a map of the city with red polygons over several neighborhoods. The central market, where Case 10 had come from, gleamed like a ruby I wished had been lost at the bottom of a river. At 3:12, the cold room compressor ran with the smooth confidence of a system no longer afraid of its own heartbeat. The number drifted down. 5.8 degrees Celsius, 5.7 degrees Celsius. I listened for the drawers and heard only the building settling and the world doing its part to make sense of itself. At 3:43, the call button sounded again and the light blinked. I pressed the intercom. Pathology. "Doc," said Bartek, "sit tight another 90 minutes. We'll have a controlled transfer plan for morning. We're rotating officers. Daria is staying with you." "I'm fine," I said. "Thank you." He hesitated. "You're the calmest person in the building, you know." "That's because my coworkers can't make eye contact with me," I said. "They're all in drawers." He laughed, a blessed human sound, and signed off. At 4 o'clock, the cold room settled to 5.3 degrees Celsius. I logged it. I stood. I stretched. I walked the perimeter like a sentry, which is what I was, despite the title on my badge and the degrees on my wall. I thought of all the families in the city whose lives had tilted tonight, and how the morgue, for all its unfriendliness, is an honest place. It tells truths no one likes and guards dignity when the rest of the building is too loud to remember it. At 418, the stairwell door behind the staff exit sighed. The crash bar didn't move. Sometimes doors speak in their sleep. I ignored it with the dignity of a cat. At 4:22, the autopsy suite call button sounded again, one soft ding, then another. I pressed the intercom. Pathology. "Hi," said Olivia, voice hoarse as if sand had rinsed it. "We're stable. We're seeing fewer returns. Cooling and isolation seems to slow it. Sunlight in the atrium helped a couple that tried to stand." She stopped. "We've started to separate rooms based on risk. We're writing protocols as we go." "Send me a copy," I said, because paper is a kind of talisman. "Will do," she said. "You okay?" "Okay," I said, "thanks to facilities." "Tell Ramesh we owe him lunch," she said. "I will," I said. "If we ever eat lunch again." We hung up, and I stood for a while with my hand on the cold room door, like a priest with a wall. At 4:49, the cold room temperature read 5.1 degrees Celsius. The hum was steady. The drawers were quiet. Quiet, like a promise. At 5:02, the elevator ran again, down this time, then up. Security's rotation changed. Daria's voice in the radio was replaced by a lower tenor, Jovan, who said he'd held the south entrance last winter when the snow canceled half the city and he still thought tonight was a stranger. At 5:17, the call button sounded and the intercom clicked. "Doc?" Max again. "We'd like to use the external stairwell to bring you some supplies and a hot drink. We can leave them on the landing. No door exchange." "Approved," I said. "Announce when you're there." At 5:25, there was a gentle knock on the staff exit door. "Max and Hannah," came a voice. "We're leaving a thermos and some sealed energy bars on the landing." "Appreciated," I said. I opened the door a hand's width, kept the gurney wedge in place, took the bag like a careful raccoon, and closed the door. The thermos held coffee one of the nurses must have whispered into being. I sipped and felt my nervous system offer gratitude in all directions at once. At 5:37, the compressor cycled down, and then, with the contented sigh of a machine that had found its equilibrium, cycled up again. The display read 4.9 degrees Celsius. We had come back to where we live. The drawers continued to be drawers. I eased the PAPR off for a moment and rubbed the bridge of my nose and felt the imprint of the hood's rim. I put the PAPR back on because uncertainty had not left the building even if some of its friends had. The radio chirped with Bartek again. "Doc, Hicks wants to know if you can hold through shift change. We'll send a team at 6:15 to escort a limited transfer of remains upstairs for controlled observation." "Copy," I said. "We can hold." At 5:54, I wrote the morning sheet. Compressor fault at 21:12, facilities rerouted feed at 23:31, temperature back to 4.9 degrees Celsius by 5:37, observed motion in 3 drawers between 21:38 and 22:29, no attempts to open after 23 o'clock. Recommend continue cold and isolation. Do not open drawers unless directed. All transfers to be escorted. All bodies to be bagged with double zip, vents sealed. A small hole if needed for releases to prevent bag inflation. Consider sound dampening in storage area because orientation to stimulus may be a factor. It was the most I'd ever written in the blandest words I could manage, which is how you carry dynamite through a hallway. At 6:02, the hospital's dawn shift began to assemble itself in the parking lot like a puzzle with missing pieces. The city outside had not forgiven its night. Buses still ran, but less often. The sun slid up past the parking deck and reached with pale hands into our corners. We don't have windows in the basement, but light makes promises to buildings, and sometimes it keeps them. At 6:09, the cold room door handle moved one last time, a gentle press from inside as if someone wanted to say something and then decided to save it. I pressed back, a palm through steel the way you touch a loved one you can't reach. At 6:13, footsteps filled the corridor outside, 2 sets, then a third, then a pause. The radio clicked. Security at pathology corridor door, ready to coordinate. "Stand by," I said, and felt my heart climb into my throat as a competing sound rose behind me from within the cold room. A dozen subtle taps, zipper tongues kissing plastic, the orderly rub of bags against rails. It built, not loud, but present, steady as a clock. The call button dinged. Once, then again. The stairwell behind me thrummed with the arrival of more feet, soft, measured. In the ceiling above, the elevator chimed as if it had made its own decision to join the conversation. I looked at my barricade. Gurney wedged, roll-in fridge angled just so. I looked at the staff exit, the crash bar gleaming like a promise of straight air and stairs. The compressor hummed its brave hum. My hands found the extinguisher handle, the pin already on its lanyard. The bone saw lay ready, a tool made for skill, not force. The drawers inside the cold room began to rattle in sequence, not violently, but in a steady call and response like a series of knocks traveling a hallway. The movement traveled from C1 down to C4, then across to D row, then back to C3, where my warm anomaly lay zipped and logged. The rhythm coalesced into a patient invitation, a slow, synchronized pattern that made the breath in my hood feel suddenly louder than the world. I stood between the autopsy suite door and the staff exit, the little radio warm against my chest, the night evaporating into a morning that would need choices. Footsteps above, a call button ding, the drawers, the compressor, the crash bar a line between now and next. I had 2 options and only one of me. I slid the roll-in fridge 2 inches more into the door, its weight a final wedge. Then I took 1 step toward the staff exit and another toward the autopsy suite, my body making a line between 2 safeties as if it could split and hold both. I set the extinguisher on the floor where I could grab it with either hand. I squared my shoulders like a person about to make the kind of decision that writes itself into a life. The drawers inside the cold room rattled once, then settled. The stairwell behind me filled with the soft weight of more feet. The call button rang a 3rd time and then held, a gentle, persistent note that made the air buzz. I chose. I turned, put my shoulder to the roll-in fridge, and shoved it tight under the corridor door's crash bar to stage a final barrier. Then I pivoted fast, reached for the staff exit and wrapped my hand around the bar. 1 heartbeat from a sprint into the stairwell, 1 heartbeat from sealing myself in with my barricade and my tools. Above me, footsteps stopped. On the radio, Bartek's voice said my name like a lifeline. In the cold room, the drawers began to tap, 1, 2, 3, in a patient rhythm that felt like an insistence from a world that had changed while we were busy counting. I pressed down on the bar, and the morgue held its breath. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.